Back to Sunrise Daily, coming to you live from our Abuja studio. I have with me two gentlemen, Mr. Nonso Osakwe, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Quad Cycle Automobile, and Honorable Mark Gbillah, a member of the House of Representatives and the Deputy Chairman of the Committee on Petroleum Resources Upstream. You're very welcome to the program, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us. Thank you. Morning, Adri. Thank you.
Honorable Member, I want to start with you because we're talking about a World Bank program to the tune of about $160 million that is intended to essentially empower entrepreneurs to create jobs throughout the nation. Can you give us a sense of what the status of the project is and why you have raised some concerns around this project?
Okay, let me start to give a brief summary about the conception of that project. It was conceptualized under the previous administration in 2013. So it had a 5-year life cycle, and it involved, like you rightly pointed out, $160 million. It was supposed to empower 4,000 SMEs. So you can imagine the amount of employment and business opportunity was expected to create for the youth, because it was specifically targeted for our unemployed youth. Now, over time, nothing appears to be going on. Unfortunately, that fund will be returned tomorrow, the 7th of September, if nothing is done expeditiously in that regard. Now, one of the issues I had to raise was the fact that when the last coordinator of the project left, the current Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment brought a former employee of his on contract who was paid 4.7 million naira per month to administer the project, and barely 3 months after his engagement as a contractor, he brought up an idea for remodeling the project to now be targeted at only 25 companies who were supposed to be given between $250,000 to $2 million each. Now, the alarming thing is this is intended to be a grant, so it's not going to be paid back. Now, that, to a lot of us, sounded pretty fraudulent, and not straightforward. And the fact that the minister brought somebody who was his former employee, he is the CEO and co-founder of African Capital Alliance, the current minister, although he resigned as the CEO when he was appointed. But the project coordinator who came to superintend this whole process was the vice president of African Capital Alliance, the same company some time ago. So in the National Assembly, I raised that alarm that, first of all, I raised two motions. First of all, to stop that remodeling of the project because it goes contrary to what the National Assembly approved and contrary to the terms of the project. And I also requested that the contract for this previous project coordinator should not be renewed because the project framework clearly indicates, and I have a copy here to give you, that the project is supposed to be headed by a director, a civil servant. And that's part of what I requested, for which the House passed. The head of service actually implemented the resolution of the House to send a director and an assistant director to head the project in compliance with the project implementation framework. But the minister refused to allow them work. He put pressure on the head of service and she had to recall. I have all the circulars to show you. So she had to recall that, which was rather disappointing to some of us, because we thought she, as a professional, should be steadfast in insisting on the right thing being done, but she was obviously under pressure. So she had to recall the director. So right now, as we speak, this project is directly being administered with funds being approved by the minister himself against every financial regulations. That is not the probity and transparency that was expected from the project. Then the alarming part, two other things that are alarming is the Ministry of Finance, which superintends World Bank projects, including this one, appears to be looking the other way while these perceived infractions are going on. And the World Bank themselves are not living up to the standards that we expect of such an institution. And that is why we suspect some collusion in the whole process. Because in every country they operate, they need to know how the laws of that country function.
Honorable member, unfortunately, it would have been ideal for the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment, Okechukwu Enelama, to be here to adequately defend himself. Unfortunately,
yes,
you're making these allegations in his absence.
Yes, I hope. And so, I wish he was here.
Let me just ask you quickly. Obviously, out of the 100, this is a project that was conceptualized and it began implementation in 2013 under the previous administration. We know that currently there is still, out of the $160 million, $80 million is
about 85 actually.
85 approximately is still available for use. You're saying it expires tomorrow. Of course it does, according to the documents at hand. Now, if the minister, as you've alleged, is essentially involved in some sort of a shady deal with a front who you allege is a former employee of his, then why is it that there is so much money left on the table and that is essentially just going to go back to the World Bank coffers tomorrow when, if your allegations are correct, he has the opportunity to essentially exhaust all of those resources under his purview?
Now, that's a very good question. Now, it's important for you to know, and for Nigerians to know, that between July last year and August this year, GEM Project has expended $8.5 million, about 3 billion naira, on consultancies. The actual grants have not been given. So it is obviously money that has been given to private companies to provide consultancy. Now, one begins to wonder, why is that necessary? And obviously, there are processes to how these funds can be expended. And that is an avenue, in my opinion, that has been created for it to be expended. Now, the other avenue was supposed to be this SME fund, which fortunately we got wind of and had to start to carry out an investigation about. And that is what has stalled it. If we hadn't done this, and of course a petition was also sent to the Department of State Services. You can reach out to them. They have a report about it by some other stakeholders and the beneficiaries who are wondering why it was that they're trying to now give just 25 firms. So that explains your question.